Going into the 13th and final round of the Tata Steel tournament, 4 players could still win. Wesley So was out ahead, and then 3 players just half a point behind were Yi, Aronian and Carlsen. And what a dramatic and hard-fought final round it proved to be. Well, things got off to an incredible start when Magnus Carlsen, in his game against Sergei Karyakin, very quickly sacrificed a piece. Karyakin in this position with black can play, well, a6 is a pretty normal move to give the bishop a retreat. He could also play bishop e6, very standard. But instead of that, he played g5. And Fabiano Caruana tweeted at this point that Karyakin must be in a very charitable mood, because this sacrifice is so inviting, and Carlsen played this very quickly indeed. Pressure against f6, very hard to relieve that pressure, and White has long-term chances to, for example, switch this knight to the king side and perhaps advance with h4. Highly dangerous. So lots of attention on that board, but then all eyes turned to the leader, Wesley So. Let's take a look at his game from the beginning. So with the white pieces, Jan Nepomniachtchi, Wesley So with black, and Jan played the Trompovsky. Now Wesley played very solidly with d5. I think it's just a good move. Now knight d2. It's been shown that taking on f6 really doesn't give White anything at all. So Jan tried knight d2, which actually, well, Wesley has faced this before. He's also played it himself, not in such serious encounters. c5, well, this is a very principled move. If White isn't occupying the centre with pawns, then Black should attack the centre with his own pawns and try to get the initiative. I think this is a very principled way to play the position. And here, well, Wesley has faced e3 before. And then knight c6 is very logical. It's as though Black is playing with the white pieces because he has more central control. And, well, for example, Wesley's opponent took on c5, and after this, well, it's clear that Black is doing absolutely fine because of those lovely centre pawns. So let's go back. Well, here, after not very much thought, Nepomniachtchi took on c5, and then e6 from Wesley. Just wants to recapture. Everything looks good. And now e4. Well, now White is fighting back in the centre. And here Wesley thought for about 10 minutes. I mean, this position has been seen before. He wasn't sure about the most natural move, bishop takes c5, because he was worrying about e5, and this starts to get very, very complicated. He was analysing the consequences of queen b6, and he thought this might be okay for Black, but he wasn't entirely sure. This starts to get very, very messy indeed. For example, if White sacrifices an exchange, and then he said he was looking at this fantastic move, knight e4, of course. If that's taken, there's a mate on d8. And yeah, if Black's not careful, you could run into something like that. Such complications, clearly he wasn't too comfortable with. In fact, in this position, this is very interesting. Here, instead of taking the knight, Black can actually play e5 and get fantastic compensation for the piece. It's very hard for White to untangle successfully in this position with the king on e2. Anyway, that's another story. So bishop takes c5 didn't suit Wesley. You could take on e4 as well, but he didn't like this because, well, first of all, you can't exchange on d1. Well, at least you'd be ill-advised to. Can't take here again. There's a mate. And if queen a5 check, then bishop d2 is very annoying. So that's why he played h6. Now, black certainly doesn't need to fear the exchange on f6. You're going to recapture here, everything's fine. So bishop h4. And now Wesley took on e4, and there's a difference now. If knight takes e4, then you can check on a5. Bishop d2 no longer possible. And, well, let's say if the queen blocks, then this is completely equal endgame. Or balanced, anyway. And if knight d2, then, well, this kind of position is quite well known. It's about equal. Very well known from, for example, the French defense. You get positions with this kind of pawn structure. Black should be absolutely fine. But instead of taking on e4, Nepomniachtchi played queen e2. Now this is very ambitious. Looking at a quick queenside castles. Now the problem is, of course, that it rather blocks in the pieces on the king's side. But if you can get some initiative by castling queenside, fine. Wesley played queen a5, an excellent answer. And here, well, if white wants to calm things down, you can take on f6 and exchange queens. And after an exchange of bishops, take here, and the ending is about equal. I think that would be a very natural way to play the position, actually. Probably, I'm sure, white's best. Instead, after almost half an hour's thought, the Russian castled queenside, an extraordinary move, allowing queen takes pawn. Well, what has white got for this? Well, you could say that, of course, it's slightly risky for black to be running around just with his queen. But the queen does create a few threats against white's king. That's one thing. But also, it's not so easy for white to initiate an attack when the queen rather blocks the bishop, for example, and these pieces aren't in the game. And in fact, it proved very difficult for white to get anything here at all. Objectively, probably this is just good for black. Queen b5 check played. Knight d7, good move. Black simply wants to, if possible, take on c5 and get castled, and then, well, with the queen here, this should be excellent for black. If knight b3 to stop a check and to cover this pawn, then black simply has a6, and the queen simply hasn't got a good square. For example, here you can take on c5 and then exchange queens, and the knight hangs. Black is just a pawn up for nothing. Or queen a5, well, you trade here and then take here. After another half hour's think, Nepomniachtchi played c6. This was taken. Now at first, Wesley said he was thinking perhaps just check and then rook b8, and there should be good counter chances for black after, with bishop b7 perhaps coming, maybe just developing this bishop and getting castled. But after a while he realised that he could simply play the bishop out straight away, and this is fantastically strong. If the queen retreats, then you can check and perhaps just bishop d5. And black is completely secure here, threatening rook b8 and crashing through on b2. This is a dreadful position for white. But taking isn't very good either. I mean, really, there's nothing to be recommended for white here. So first of all, a check, and now rook b8. If the queen moves away, then black has a winning attack. Let's give another check. well, it doesn't matter where the king goes. Let's say the king goes to e2, then black simply castles. You know, there's no rush about this, actually. These pieces just play no part in the game. Rook c8 is coming. Black is going to take here, and it's going to be mate very, very soon. Black has perfect coordination. White has no alternative but to take the rook. So black is now, well, I was going to say just a queen up. Queen for a rook and a minor piece, but in fact, you know, white's position really is nothing special here. There's no compensation to speak of. And now it's just a case of bringing the pieces out very quickly. This is how the game went. So Wesley starting the process of just bringing the rest of his pieces into play. Just has to watch out that his queen doesn't get trapped. But that's very easy to parry. The knight controls this square. h4, well, this is a desperate attempt to bring the rook into play. Again, if black is very careless, you can allow this, but in fact, it's really easy to defend against. With a very natural move, you want to bring your rook into play. The rook came to h3, and now knight d3 check. I mean, there's really nothing that white could do against this anyway. If that's taken, then rook takes knight. Brings the rook into play, white's king opens up. So this was taken with the bishop. Rook takes, I beg your pardon, taken with the bishop. And now rook takes. Pieces exchanged. And now the queen, well, has no more business here. There's no attack, but queen switches to the other side of the board to hit these loose pawns, and this is already completely resignable. Let me just take you through the last moves of the game. The queen wants to hit here, and now knight b4 completely ties white up. The king can't move. Well, the knight d5 is coming, for example, if bishop here, then knight d5 is, for example, is absolutely dreadful. And you take here. White simply doesn't have a good move in this position, so Nepomniachtchi resigned. What an absolutely crushing victory. So, well, in the end, it didn't matter what happened to Aronian, Wei Yi, and Carlsen. In fact, Carlsen failed to win that game against Karjakin. Karjakin defended extremely well. Wei Yi tried for a long time to defeat Wojciech. He overpressed and lost. And Aronian, well, actually, he was always in trouble in that game against Andreikin, and Aronian lost as well, which left Wesley So clear leader, clear winner, I should say, with 9 out of 13. Magnus Carlsen, after he drew, with 8 points in second place, and then Aronian and Wei Yi and Adiban on 7.5. He defeated Rapport in the last round. Wesley So, a deserved winner of the tournament. He was never in any huge trouble, and Carlsen, I'm afraid, just made errors in a couple of big games against Geary, against Rapport. And Wesley So was just very even throughout. After his victory, he said, "I'd like to thank the Lord for letting me win this tournament. All the glory goes to him." Then he thanked his family who were there with him in Vaikonsei. He thanked his trainer, Vladimir Tukmarkov. He thanked the organisers and the sponsors. And in the end, he said, "I'd like to thank all the people who made this event possible. If a single person is missing, the whole event wouldn't be complete." What fantastic words, and what a true champion.